Better late than never. Silver Lining is the final chapter in the City That Never Sleeps DLC pack, which makes it the last piece of real content Spider-Man PS4 will ever see, and most likely, the last Spider-Man story we'll get for the console. It has a lot to honor, not just the previous two DLCs and everything they set up for Silver Lining, but the base game and everything it did for Spider-Man as a whole. Let me tell you now, Silver Lining does not do enough to justify the price of the season pass. Unless you got it for cheaper, or through the deluxe edition of the base game, I wouldn't recommend a single chapter. And with the DLC's continual inherent problem of being disjointed from the main story's city, the DLC packs are still prevented from being anything above satisfactory. If you're not yet familiar with the implications of this model, then don't worry, we'll see. And I'm not going to judge the actual content of Silver Lining any differently because of its inherent flaws. It might be damned, but at least gameplay-wise, it's a satisfying finale to the chapters before it. And like with the others, we start off with MJ. I assumed at the start of the heist that all these connecting the dots bits would culminate in some big story for her at the Bugle, but it turns out they were only ever meant to be fancy recaps. I wonder how she managed to get a picture of Yuri fighting Hammerhead from the cutscene. Did she look up a compilation on YouTube? On that note, as it happens, Turf Wars' cliffhanger never ended up meaning anything. Hammerhead simply broke out, and that was it. Then why did they pan up to the Empire State all ominously? Believe me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. In keeping with the formula, we're soon off to fight some of Hammerhead's goons, but this is Act 3. It doesn't have an introduction. We're in the thick of it immediately, just like Turf Wars, and we'll soon see how far that goes. I'm not counting the Project Olympus brutes as new enemies, because they're just reskinned brutes, but Hammerhead's new jetpack goons are a lot more like it. They finally learned to go higher than 2 feet off the ground. Impressive. Kinda. Take Sable's original jetpack fighters and swap the restraints with some kind of air mine thing. You swing into it, you get bamboozled. Simple as that. But given the fact that you can clearly see them coming, and redirect them, you'd have to be a gold-plated bongo to get hit. Good on paper, lacking in execution. This fight can be taken above ground for the most part, so their other new move might not get adequately showcased, but the jetpackers can also slam into the ground at high speed, resulting in a shockwave that isn't anything to scoff at. A dangerous attack like that isn't much, but it gives you a reason to prioritize targets in combat, and significantly raises the challenge of most encounters they're in. They seem even to be a challenge for cutscene Spider-Man, until that is, Silver Sable rocks up in the U-plane and opens fire. A genius move, really. Make sure you engage thin air, so the police officer definitely dies, and the flying power-armored criminal gets a head start on Spider-Man.
You okay?
Yeah.
Sable's understandably miffed about the whole crime family's robbing all her weapons and terrorizing the city with them, but that kinda sounds like someone else who not a few months ago was using high-tech weapons to oppress the city. Reminds me of someone. Of course, this is somehow Spider-Man's fault, so it's your ass. About time though. Silver Sable's boss fight is hard to even count as a boss fight, but boy oh boy am I glad it's in here. It was missing from the base game. This I see as retribution. About 4 hits into a combo, Sable will tackle you, dealing a significant amount of damage. But why? To encourage you to get creative? Because that's the result. Sable's counters don't prevent you from beating on her, they punish you for it, despite the fact that you aren't necessarily making a mistake, which, in this game, is a break in convention. If it kills you the first time you see it, then I'd call it unfair, but that's unlikely. Essentially then, the boss becomes getting in 3 hits at most, and a damn lot of environmental attacks. It's over quickly too. They didn't have to do this, and it isn't the only boss, so despite its problems, I'm very pleased we got it. But all our fighting's given Jetpack John a window to escape, and Sable goes right on after him. Despite how dumb it was, that was still a very good introduction. Who expected a boss fight this early on?
What happened to you can thank me by not dying?
I am surprised that some people were expecting an appearance from Silvermane rather than Silver Sable. Despite the whole Magia thing, it's pretty clear that after her weapons were given out that she'd be returning, and she definitely needed it given her abrupt disappearance from the main story. Speaking of abrupt disappearance, I am still planning Screwball's murder, and you might be too, because she shows up right now. Brilliant. As with Turf Wars, she does bring one new challenge type. In this case, that's bomb disposal. It's Taskmaster's bomb disposal, but with an added twist, aside from the photobombs, which are, in this case, not bad. They're not random, they're not particularly interesting, but there's no luck element, and they don't ruin any flow. Instead of webbing the bomb up, you simply press R1 at the perfect time. The real twist is that at the end, there'll be a truck, and that puts a short QuickTime event between you and the final bomb. It's not much, but it's enough to make it a little more exciting than the Taskmaster variant. Not bad. Better than stealth, easily. But the improvements don't end there. Our first new crime is called tech salvage. You got a target, that being a truck, and waves of goons who want to get in. Enemies will go for the target, you have to make sure they're not next to it long enough for the timer to max out. It's a defend the point crime. That's new, it's not a reskin, and it's fairly challenging too. I'll tell you what else it is. Great. Seriously, this is exemplary. Exactly what a crime should be. We're off to a fantastic start. In a conversation with Miles you can have on the way to the next mission, you learn a little more about why understanding science is so important for spider people. If you want to get good at swinging, you've got to be calculating the pendulum equations while you're doing it. We'll see where that goes shortly. Turns out, our destination was a shipping facility. Now, where have I heard that set up before? Oh yeah, it's the premise of the entire game. But not this time. No, Spider-Man forgot that you're supposed to sneak up from behind, not in front, because that way they might see you. Paulie and Frank do a runner, but before you can catch up, Sable comes out of nowhere and starts blowing them away. Now, I didn't think there'd be a set piece in the DLCs. Too much time to develop, too expensive, but they used what they already had, car chases, just strapped Sable's gunship on top and threw in a bunch of explosions to create one of the best set pieces in the game. One of, far from the best. Mainly because you actually have a degree of control here. You get to choose which cars to fight, traversal's all up to you. There's no QTE, so you're properly immersed, not just bewitched with pretty VFX. It goes on for a few minutes, and it seems this is exactly what I brought up with regards to car chases in the first video. I'm glad that they finally got to reach some of their potential, even if it is among the last bits of content we get. With only one truck left, Sable engages with you still on board. She holds the driver at gunpoint, but Spider-Man stops her and proposes they work together. With the way she suddenly changes her tune, and even clearly slaps something on Spider-Man's arm, you gotta wonder, is Captain Physics Equations here as smart as he cracked up to be? Who wouldn't suspect something? And he's got the spider sense and all. This hurts to watch. Moving on, please, our next stop is rescuing a guy called David Obedemi, ex-Sable International. I don't really know why he's in the DLC apart from to guide you to the hideouts. In Silver Lining, we've got 3 Olympus hideouts, same deal as Turf Wars and just as difficult. It's great to have such a wealth of endgame combat encounters that you can go back and repeat anytime you like. Of course, being bound to this city-state is still as much of an issue as it was before, but that affects the crimes far more than it ever did the hideouts. We know tech salvage is good, let's have a look at a few more. Sable APC chase. But it's not though. You just press one button and then it's not a chase, it's a fight with some goons on the street. Tanker Standoff is just a reskinned school bus hijack, so again, just a bunch of goons in the street. And Magia Truck Raid. I'll give you 3 guesses as to what that boils down to. Well, at least they got a minigun brute to spice things up. I'm starting to see why you're forced to do the first tech salvage, because that is the only one any better than the rest of the City That Never Sleeps pitiful showing. A serious letdown. The Collectathons also return with a series of audio logs recounting the therapy sessions of a Magia Enforcer. The dialogue's good, the voice acting's better. It's far more interesting than most of the Collectathons. It's better there than not. As for Screwball, the combat challenges haven't changed at all. Inconsistent photobombs reduces skill factor and messes up the flow of what could have been a fun fight. The gadget challenge this time round doesn't seem to make much sense. The Electric Web and Impact Web don't necessarily have all that much synergy, certainly not like the Web Bomb and Concussion Blast did. Electric Web just stops them, but they were already slow to begin with. The skill is lining yourself up and the guy you want to shoot so that they'll hit the photobomb plates, but unless you force yourself to use the fine aim mode, you can't always guarantee that Spider-Man will shoot the right guy when you do. So again, photobombs reduce skill factor, and in this case, I find the inconsistency quite frustrating. Good then that I get to take it out. Kinda. When you've beaten all the Screwball challenges, she hosts a party, giving you an opportunity to take her out. Down. I meant down. But life's never that easy. It turns out she expected you to arrive and does a Class A runner, somehow. I mean, she's faster than Black Cat. Okay. This is the final Screwball challenge by her design, and as such you've still got photobombs. It's good, it really makes me want to paint the walls with her. You don't. No, Screwball's a forgetful lass, so I'll forgive her for just deciding not to jump 50 meters in a single leap at the end, easily allowing Spider-Man to catch her with this puny tackle. And that's it. She gets arrested. The disappointment, honestly. It's not even worth how much I wanted to get rid of her. This is a weak conclusion by any measure, for Screwball and the side content as a whole. Silver Lining's offering is probably the best of the lot, but if they hadn't messed up so horrifically by removing all but thug crimes from the main city's story after completion, then I think we'd be at the point where locking DLC crimes behind their city-states wouldn't be such a bad thing, because they're always so uninspired that the positive effects of increased variation would be negligible. It's a damn shame. Our next story mission is held up by the dialogue. I didn't think they had any more stereotypical names to use, but now we've got Tony and Sal involved, so hey. Following has one mechanic. The pair of them will turn around and suspect you at certain intervals. You've just got to hit triangle to blend in like a worse version of Assassin's Creed. Fine for the time we use it. But then, for the first time, we're allowed to use our spider powers. As Peter. Because no one has cameras in New York. Stupidity aside, it can be forgiven. This is the best compromise between having an unmasked Peter suit and trying to be all immersive like that Insomniac could have hit. You find Tony's laptop and that leads you to the man himself, but before you can get anything out of him, Sable shows up, literally out of nowhere, I wonder why, and learns from Tony that Hammerhead wants to speak with her. It's a trap, obviously, she knows that too, but decides it would be best to dive in headfirst all the same. 500 IQ move, brilliant, I cannot, I'm lost for words. Who could have saw that coming? Sable's boneheadedness aside, this fight is fairly enjoyable. You can free Sable on your own terms, but even with her backing you up, the fight is surprisingly difficult. You're up against multiple brutes, rocket dudes, shield bashy boys, and those jetpack goons who finally get to show off their shockwaves. The DLCs needed some challenge to them, this is it, and I'm grateful. But even getting past that is not enough. Hammerhead finally shows himself, and he's no charismatic tough guy anymore. Seems to me that the Olympus's torso was shaped like a dead ribcage to give him a kind of unsettling appearance. Well, he certainly fights like a demon too.
See you in hell, bug. Two for one. My lucky day.
Hammerhead awakens. Sable is too late. The reunion with Black Cat was already ruined by the trailer, so there's only so much disappointment you can feel from this. It's completely underplayed, which makes the ending of the heist look like a joke. All of that back in October, for a few lines of dialogue, and they're not even good. She gives you a drive with everything you could ever want on Hammerhead, and that makes you even for her betrayal. Okay.
Bye, Felicia.
Oh fuck! On that note, MJ tells you afterwards that she's leaving too, going to Sable's home country, Symkaria, to report on the crisis. Sucks for Peter, great for us though. You guys know what this means? No MJ mission! Unwelcome home! Hell yes! Anyway, now it's time for us to be the savior. Hammerhead's base is a fantastic mission. The sewer environment looks incredible. Let's get that out of the way immediately. Even better than most of the stuff from the base game. The stealth sections are nothing special, but they're another way of pacing the level out up until you find yourself in a seemingly uninteresting part of the base that is actually harboring the details of Hammerhead's plan. Stealing Sable's stuff was less about the equipment, more about luring Sable into Hammerhead's territory, and stealing the woman herself. He got what he wanted. Sable's screams can be heard in the distance, but not for long. She breaks free and finally you work together, properly as well. I mentioned how disappointing Black Cat's team-up was in the heist, but here, Sable's got a full and effective AI. It's a fun battle, the banter's good too, and it ends with a completely pointless, but very cool team-up finisher. The whole funny person asks for a high five from serious person routine is painfully old, but seeing it here makes me smile anyway. The occasion they're celebrating is learning that Hammerhead's weakness is that his skull plate is weak to heat. Sorted then. Sable asks you over to her base to prepare for the final battle. But where? Well, it turns out Sable had an invisible aircraft carrier just there. I mean, between this and the Avengers 6 years ago, it's not got quite the same magic. I'd love to know how they managed to mask the noise, the heat, the everything, to be honest. I mean, even birds would give them away. How did they manage to create a perfect simulation of water in its place? Because it's not like with a person where you're only displacing already invisible air. Does it just spend its time weaving between small boats to not hit anything? I hope so. On board, you help Sable prepare her gunship for the battle with Hammerhead. Now that the boat's out in the open, Hammerhead's going to be coming. Sounds like a problem. Apparently, it was the plan. Couldn't you have just waited until you revealed the boat? I'm so confused. So he shows up and wants to kill you, and there's no motivations or charismatic delivery like in Turf Wars. You just start fighting. Okay. Final boss, huh? Let's see how it plays. His melee attacks aren't quick, and even if they're in range, you should be hitting him. His main attack will be a laser shot, same as last time. Dodge that, you can get up close. You'll be magnetized to either leg, but focusing on one doesn't actually change anything. He will throw punches, but these are no harder to avoid than any other. When you bring him down, it's a QTE to give Sable a shot on his metal skull. When your skull's literally glowing orange, you'd think your skin would burn, or your brain. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Weakened Hammerhead's completely open, but his mistake beckons out one last trick. Energy shields. He's impenetrable. But that's not the reason he's more difficult in his later phases. Oh look. Goons. More potential damage sources, far more frequent dodges. Where has that happened before? Oh yeah, in a better boss fight. Hammerhead's shields are swiftly removed by chucking Sable's bombs at him, at which point it's the same deal as before. Until that is, the laser stops working. Uh-oh, Spaghetti-O.
Get ready to jump!
Wait, what?
A noble sacrifice would have redeemed Sable in my eyes, but I'm kinda happy she's still alive. Badass. Of course, this is entertainment media, so Hammerhead has to walk out of the fire, with his face completely intact. I want to know where he gets his cruise missile level force-resistant hair from. He looks barely singed, but then he short-circuits or something? Okay. Sable thanks you for your help, insults your jokes, which, I mean, come on. Someone needed to say his quips are pitiful these days, and then sods off back to Symkaria, which ends the DLC. What is it with every important woman in Spider-Man's life sodding off, either literally or metaphorically? What is it with Silver Lining and completely failing to provide a good conclusion to the city that never sleeps? Black Cat, subject of the entire first chapter, she's just back and then gone in the blink of an eye. What happened to Hammerhead's charisma? He had a well-executed, well-thought-out plan in both Turf Wars and the heist that gave Silver Lining everything it needed. But there's no thinking here. Hammerhead's got no charisma, no plan, he just wants to kill you and Sable. And as for Sable, you spend 95% of the DLC mopping up her never-ending mess. What happened to Yuri? What about the Dons, the Magia politics, the Dark Knight stuff? I mean, this feels like an Act 3 to a completely different story. Screwball's conclusion was pathetic. MJ just left, you got about 100 frames of Miles doing anything interesting, and logic seems to have completely left the building too. Worlds can't contradict themselves, it's why we can accept dragons existing, but not Tyrion fast-traveling in Game of Thrones. So it's irrelevant if Spider-Man's powers don't obey our physics. It can't throw logic to the wind if it wants an immersive plot. Screwball is somehow able to run faster than Black Cat, but then forgets at the end. And there's Sable's ridiculous aircraft carrier, Hammerhead walking out of the flames with an untouched face, Hammerhead still being alive after his brains were boiled, and Spider-Man's endless meat-headed decisions on top of Sable's. I specifically mentioned how I didn't like Silver Sable acting like a complete muppet so often in the main story, and here we are again, an entire DLC that revolves around Silver Sable inarguably acting like a muppet. Everything that was bad about her character is exacerbated in this DLC. Narratively, Silver Lining has dropped the ball in almost every conceivable way apart from the visuals. Cinematics are gorgeous, but that's far from good enough. I'm incredibly disappointed with it. It's good then that it's backed up with a good set piece, multiple memorable missions, 2 enjoyable boss encounters, a good new enemy type, and plenty of side content, albeit rarely above competent. Silver Lining is the best and worst DLC at the same time. It's gonna depend on what you value most, because if it's the story, then you're in for a huge letdown. And if, like seemingly so many others, the suits are an important factor, then you might feel something similar. Or the exact opposite. You'll see what I mean. We have the Raimi suit. It's here. Thank God. Now, I never cared much for its inclusion, but there were many who did, and I don't think Insomniac's silence was good enough. Say something, even if it's be patient. But the mess we had surrounding it is far from all on them. I have not seen any evidence of harassment, but the community did not act maturely in its requests to Insomniac. At least the memes were funny, but because of the Raimi suit's launch alongside Silver Lining, your suit experience might have been far better than the previous DLCs, even though that's not a result of the DLC itself. As for the paid suits, we got the Aaron Eichmann suit. I can't pronounce his name, but I'm going to assume it's Eichmann. That's another spider armor. I'm starting to get a bit confused about that now. There's also the Cyborg suit, which is cool enough, and the Spider-Verse suit, a fair movie crossover even if it is just another classic suit. Overall, it's competent, definitely no Turf Wars, but better than the heist. But what throws a spanner in the works is that we don't know how many more suits we're going to get, and unless these Fantastic Four leaks turn out to be less than they're hyped up to be, then Silver Lining is viewed at least as the last real shot at getting many of the suits we still don't have. That's where a lot of disappointment comes from. The Raimi suit might make it the best, and the mediocre selection might make it the worst. We'll have to see, but I do think we'll get suit packs in the future. And regarding Spider-Man PS4's future, we know that the endgame crimes are still jacked, and I don't think there's any hope in sight for them. Rain, however, I haven't given up on. It's been months. Forget the Raimi suit. Can we start brigading about Rain? We had it in Turf Wars, but then they pulled a sneaky on us. Please, if it really can't be done, tell us. Just tell me. I can't die happy until this is fixed, and that really is everything. Here we are then. Spider-Man PS4's last bit of content. Done. I still think that this is the best Spider-Man game ever made, and in a year's time you'll probably find it difficult to find the game without the DLC packed in. So price aside, the content of the DLC is a positive addition. Spider-Man PS4 is a better game for having them. People who pick it up in the future might be alone, however, because having played it now, I struggle to think of any reason to come back. The story begins to wear terribly thin on repeat playthroughs thanks to how on rails so much of it is. And as for the gameplay, the combat is betrayed by only having ridiculously easy thug crimes appear, and the swinging just isn't deep enough. Even after coming back a month later, I still find myself bored 30 minutes in because there's just so little to do with it. Its lack of depth is a knife that's going to do more and more damage over time. Well, we can still hope for the sequel. Despite it all, what we have at the end is still a great rendition of swinging and combat, the best New York we've ever laid eyes on, and a heartfelt, emotional Spider-Man story. It's still a victory for the character and Insomniac. They should be proud. I'll be waiting eagerly for whatever they've got next, and in the meantime, I'll thank you all for watching. I would have had this out sooner, but after Darksiders 2, I needed a holiday. And speaking of which, you might want to check that out. I'm very proud of it, and there's much more to come. If you have any cash to spare, I'm hugely appreciative of any and all donations. And I'm greatly thankful for the spike in patrons I received after Darksiders 2. It means a lot. With that said, I'll see you next time.